This is Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Hello and welcome to Olivia's Book Club, and I am your host, Olivia Fierro, and I'm very, very excited to introduce you to an author who is truly a household name. I mean, if you love delicious thriller, stressful fiction, then you definitely know Karin Slaughter. But let me just tell you a little bit, because even I was just stunned by the bio here. Karin Slaughter is the author of more than 20 instant New York Times bestsellers. It's not like instant soup. Like, this is not easy. and I didn't even know that was a thing until not long ago. And that list includes Pieces of Her, which was adapted, as you know, for Netflix. And this is a crazy statistic here, Karin. 225 million hours of people's time were spent watching Pieces of Her on Netflix all around the world, and we are picking up with one of those characters from that book in her latest book, which is Girl Forgotten. So, Karin, congratulations on endless success, and Girl Forgotten is a fantastic read. So please set it up for the listener.
Well, it is in the world of Pieces of Her. It has Andrea Oliver, who most people recognize from that book and that show. But it's really about an unsolved murder from 40 years ago. This murder completely upended a small coastal town in Maryland. And there are two timelines, one that focuses on Emily Vaughn, who's a teenager. And there's some terrible circumstances surrounding the brutal attack that led to her death. And then we fast forward 40 years to the present day, and that's where Andrea comes in. And she's a newly minted US Marshal who has an ulterior motive for looking into Emily's case.
It was so great because I was able to listen to and read the book on NetGalley early. And so I kind of just said, I want to hear this. I want to listen to this before I knew you would be available for interviews at all. And so I hadn't put the pieces together with the Pieces of Her, but we had watched the show. And so it was kind of like a really fun thing. Like, wait a second, I know these people. Oh, wait, I remember her first introduction to the US Marshal Service, being on kind of the other side of things, and all of the growth and change that had happened between the two storylines. So the success of the show, did that help to frame this, or is the timeline just good fortune, or were you writing the story of the Emily Vaughn murder and then decided to kind of connect the dots because this Netflix show went so great?
Well, I actually wrote this book a year ago. So it was before the Netflix show had even come out. They were filming it. They got postponed because of COVID. They were ready to start filming in Vancouver, and then the shutdowns happened. And since the producer and a lot of the stars like Toni Collette and Bella Heathcote were from Australia, they just moved everything to Australia. So technically the book would have come out this year and the series would have been last year. So one really didn't depend on the other. It was more me asking what happens next to Andrea. Where does she go after Pieces of Her ends, and how does she redefine her life as a young woman?
This is a young woman who has, I guess you would say a lot of baggage, to put it in a simple way, but share some of her backstory that she's bringing to this job in the U.S. Marshal Service.
I primarily think that she did it first to really annoy her mother, which a lot of women can relate to.
Relatable.
That.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning of Pieces of Her, Laura, the mother, is telling Andrea, look, you need to start your life. You need to get a real job. You need to go out there and start adulting. And then we have Laura and Andrea having a similar conversation in Girl Forgotten, except Laura's saying, I didn't mean this job. I didn't mean adult this way, because she doesn't really approve of her daughter being a marshal. She thinks of the marshals as the enemy, actually, because, as you said, they were both involved in witness security. Laura is a criminal, and she paid for her crimes, and she's trying to atone for them, but she doesn't really think well of law enforcement.
So she is kind of on the flip side of the witness protection and all of that, as we're following Andy on her journey, and she gets a pretty plum assignment straight out of the gate, which raises some red flags probably for the people around her, because she's fast-tracked to be on a judicial security team, and she's partnered with what has got to be one of the most enjoyable characters that you can ever spend time with. How did you come up with all of the quirky wonder that is Bible?
Well, Leonard Bible is also a Marshal. He's older than Andrea. He's sort of a mentor to her. And he's a guy who's lived a real life. You know, he's been undercover. He's done a lot of different things. And part of the reason I wrote him is I had met a lot of marshals, and they do have an incredible kind of confidence. And they're trained to be that way, to go in and just assume authority in any situation and project authority. And, you know, the way that Leonard Bible does it is a very subtle way of asserting yourself. You know, it's not this sort of toxic masculinity. It's more like, hey, let's talk, let's figure this out. But yeah, I'm still in charge. And I think he's a great mentor for Andrea to learn how to be the right kind of police officer that she wants to be.
Oh, he's a perfect mentor. And he's also a perfect contrast to a lot of the male characters that we're introduced to through the course of this story, who are toxic, to say the least, who are violent, who are predatory, and the themes of, you know, women always sort of being hunted. And so for her to be partnered with a man who respects his wife, loves his wife, and, you know, everything that he brings to the table is a really nice balance for how the world really is, full of good and bad.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what crime fiction should do, is explore the dark and light that we have in society.
There are so many layers to this story, and digging into kind of the timeline in the 1980s and then jumping to now as she's investigating. How do you, when you're sitting down to start writing, are you incredibly organized with your layout of, okay, here's this storyline here, and here's how I'm going to be? I mean, because as you have to peel back the layers, I just am amazed at how the stories are able to unfold in that kind of synergy with you biting your nails, waiting for what's happening next.
Well, thank you for saying that. That's something I work very hard at. I think that, you know, you have to have a propulsion in a thriller. You know, who did it? Why did they do it? How are they going to find out? But there's also the mystery of character. And for Andrea, her journey is, who am I going to be as an adult? What kind of person do I want to be? What kind of marshal? What kind of daughter? What kind of partner? What kind of lover? All of those things come into play for her. And she's making those decisions and learning as she goes along, which is unfortunately what most of us have to do. No one hands you a shortcut on how to live your life.
Yeah, she's very relatable because, you know, in those early years when you're trying to be an adult and you're trying to separate yourself from the influence of your parents, and she also doesn't want to be connected with a man. She doesn't want to be anybody's girlfriend or anybody's whatever. She wants to kind of earn a place and a definition on her own. And so oftentimes we make mistakes and push people away and isolate ourselves when we need people the most.
Exactly. You know, and that's one of the hard lessons that Andrea learns toward the end of the novel, is that sometimes you do need to ask for help.
I want to ask you about your charitable passion project and this Save the Libraries effort that you have. Why are libraries so important to you, and when did this begin for you, and what does it mean to you?
I got my start in the library as a little kid. My dad would make sure that every Saturday I was dropped off in the morning and I could read whatever book I wanted, so long as if I had a question, I would ask him. And it opened up some discussions probably he didn't want to be having with his young daughter, but he was really open about it because he understood that reading is a way for kids to understand other cultures, other people, other nations, you know, that you're not the only person in the world, and how you think is not always the way everybody else thinks. So there's a real sense of critical thinking you get from reading books as a young person. And thankfully, I've been successful enough that I can give back. I started Save the Libraries, gosh, I guess over maybe 15 years ago. And it's a private foundation, and we just give block grants to libraries that are doing good things all around the world, not just in America. One of the libraries we supported was Ferguson during all that was going on with the police, between the community, and the library stayed open so the kids had a place to go. And that's what libraries do. They offer shelter to everyone. They don't discriminate against anyone. And that's why I think it's really important. We need to support them, especially now when people are, for some reason, attacking libraries and trying to police what's on their shelves rather than police their own children. So I think it's important that we support them as much as we can and look to our communities to rally around these wonderful institutions.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, keeping our libraries with open doors and as much access to information in the pages of the books as possible. It can be a life-changing experience for anybody who goes in there. And it's funny, I think about being a kid and spending my summer, basically the activity that you did was you go to the library, you sign up for the reading challenges, and you hang around in the air conditioning in the summer. And, you know, there's no fancy camps or travel or anything. And so we overcomplicate things. And now if you have the resources to keep kids so busy, when there's just a fantastic thing that happens when you're just wandering and exploring those books.
Absolutely. And I had terrific librarians who gave me recommendations that really shaped my childhood.
Karin, will you set the scene for me when you're writing? What time of day do you write? I imagine you're always constantly, when someone's so successful as you, the editors are like, okay, we need your next book now, let's get your next instant bestseller. So are you on a rigorous writing schedule, and how disciplined are you through the course of the day with how you do it?
Well, once I decide to write, I'm very disciplined. And I sit down in the morning and I start writing, and I don't stop until I can't write anymore, which sometimes is at 3 and sometimes is at midnight, just depending on how the story's going. But I have a little cabin up in North Georgia in the mountains that my dad built for me about 20 years ago, a little respite for me away from Atlanta to be up there and isolated and writing. And it's just a very idyllic setting, and it's just me and my laptop and the story. And to me, that's my favorite time, is just sitting down and working out how I'm going to tell my next book.
Wow. When you're writing and coming up with some of your darker scenes, or some, when you're kind of engulfing yourself in kind of the violent acts that are naturally a part of the crime fiction and thrillers and mystery genres, is it hard to shake it off? Do you live in it? Is there anything that scares you, or is it naturally just something that is a very comfortable space for you?
You know, the thing that scares me are slasher movies. And the
Really?
cheesier, I can't watch them. It just freaks me out.
That topless girl is running into the woods. What is she thinking?
Yeah, I can't do it. But, you know, the hard part is not writing the parts that you're thinking about. You know, I do take an unflinching look at violence, and I'm very careful not to feel exploitative or titillating. I just want to show it for what it is. You know, there's nothing sexy about it. There's nothing like you would want to pull drama from. The hard part for me is writing what happens next. How do people respond to this act? How do people recover from it? What does it do to the community? What does it do to the police officers investigating it? How does it change their lives and their relationships? That is where the real work of writing comes in for me, is the aftermath of violence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it affects everybody in a different way, and the ripple effect is, and like in this book, community-wide, generations. It goes on and on.
Exactly, and you know, we've all experienced a real trauma from COVID and the lockdowns and all of that has been going on. And I just wonder, for how many generations will people hold on to this? I mean, my father wasn't raised during the Great Depression, but his mother was. And a lot of things that she did because of the Depression are things that my father still does. You know, he can't go to a restaurant without taking some of the sweet and low off the table and putting it in his pocket the same way she did. So I don't know. What are COVID survivors and people who survived this, or their children or grandchildren, going to not blow out candles on a birthday cake
Ever,
anymore.
right.
What kind of effect is it going to have on them?
Oh gosh, I hate to think about it, but we will have to wait and see. What advice do you have for people who, I mean, just you have just such an incredible fan base, and anybody who loves to read, I think, does have a tiny dream of what if I have something worth writing about and a story to tell myself. How would they start, or what's the key to kind of unleashing that?
Well, I'll preface this by saying everyone probably has at least one really good idea for a book. I really believe that, but that's not the hard part. The idea is the easy part. It's sitting down and figuring out how that idea will be expressed through plot, through character, through development, through all of those things. Even if you're not writing a thriller, you have to have some sense of suspense to propel the reader forward. And so my advice is to just sit down and start doing it, because that's the work of being a writer, is putting your butt in the chair, staring at the screen, and figuring it out.
Are you still, even though you're constantly writing, coming up with your own ideas, are you still able to enjoy sitting down with a book and lose yourself as a reader?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's my me time. And we have so many great writers today. I just finished Jennifer Hillier's latest book.
Oh, I love that. I talked to her recently.
She's amazing.
Amazing.
I read Jar of Hearts years ago, but the new one is called
We Do What We Do in Things We Do in the Dark.
Yes, yeah, in the dark. Yeah, I've got it right here on my desk. I just finished it. We're just living in a great time for thrillers in particular, but also, not to bash the men, but women are doing some amazing work in this genre. I think about Alafair Burke or Lisa Gardner or Lisa Unger or Kay White. I mean, the list just goes on. And so I feel like we're really lucky to be living in these times where women can tell their stories.
Agreed. Oh, Karin, it's such a pleasure to talk to you, and even more of a pleasure to be able to read your work. And I completely, I assume that you loved the Netflix version. I know it's probably hard at any time to see your story taken on in a different capacity if you're not completely in control of it, but you must have been thrilled with it.
Oh, absolutely. And, I would tell readers the show is the show and the book is the book.
Yeah.
But I think most of my readers were pretty pleased with Pieces of Her. And Toni Collette is amazing.
Yeah.
So, she could, I would watch a show about her being a painter, just painting walls. So it was really great, and it was a good experience. And my Will Trent series has been picked up by ABC. They're going to start showing that, I hope, in January. Nice. And I've seen the pilot, and that's great. So I'm really glad, and I hope my readers enjoy seeing these adaptations.
Well, and let's hope it comes around full circle where people are seeing these shows and then going, wait a second, that's based on a book. Maybe it's time I pick up a book. It's been a minute, right?
Yeah, exactly. I love those stories of people who go back to reading and they get my books and it makes them want to read more.
Oh, that's what it's all about. Well, you certainly do that, and you do that well. The book is fantastic. The latest one from Karin Slaughter is Girl Forgotten. Karin, thank you so much for talking with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.